And gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.
Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to episode number 18 of Off the Track, a dirt track racing podcast where we like to talk about our experiences in the sport that we love. I'm your host, Tanner Holmes, and to my left, I have my best friend and co-host, Bennett Gooch. Bennett, how have you been lately?
We're doing good. Sadly, we weren't able to make it down to the Peter Murphy Classic with you, but we had rodeo up on my end that we helped put on, the Reading Rodeo, which is a PRCA rodeo, which is on the circuit for cowboys and cowgirls throughout the year to earn money to work their way towards the NFR. And let me tell you, on our end, we absolutely sold out. My dad's the president, and he did things that we've never done before, and it was a success. It rained for about 10 minutes. Nobody left. They all cheered. They all bought some more beer and had a good time. So our end was a success, and I know your end on certain points were a success as well.
Absolutely. So we went down to the Peter Murphy Classic this last weekend to support the event. My first time ever, attending the Peter Murphy Classic and running a 410 sprint car at the Tulare Thunder Bowl. I had ran a 410 before at Hanford, the Colorado Speedway, which Peter actually owns that joint. And for today's episode, to kind of give a little bit of a better perspective on the event, just not from my angle and everyone at Tanner Holmes Racing, our team's angle, we got the winner who actually swept all four A-main events down there between the Colorado Speedway and the Tulare Thunder Bowl, Dominic Scelzi.
Yep. And
we got him in over the phone, and man, this was a great interview. We talked to Dominic a little bit about what's going on for him in 2021, his racing season. He's sticking close to home in California, which is not what he usually does.
Yeah.
In past years, he's been out racing on the road, chasing big outlaw shows, all-star races, even a couple 360 races, throughout the Midwest, just racing as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And then we also talk about, his dominating weekend, and man, he was fun to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen the Scelzi brothers race throughout their career and whatnot, and it's pretty cool to be able to go down there with you and get to watch him in real life because he drives that car pretty hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, he's been sticking around in California for the 2021 season, and you're going to see a bunch of him just on the West Coast, continuing to chase all these big shows like the Peter Murphy Classic, which I didn't tally up how much money he won, but it had to have been right around $20,000 in 2 nights, which that's a pretty nice payday. So anyway, Dominic Scelzi for episode number 18 of Off the Track over the phone. Let's jump into the interview. So joining us here today on episode number 18 of Off the Track, he's been pretty hot over the social media for dirt track racing lately, as he just recently swept the Peter Murphy Classic in the 360 and 410 sprint car. He's the driver of the Scelzi Motorsports number 41. It's Dominic Scelzi. Dominic, welcome to the show.
How we doing, guys?
Pretty good. How's everything been? Are you watching the Outlaws right now?
Yeah, I was actually just inside and my brother's starting fourth in the dash, so that's really good. He ran second on Saturday night at Williams Grove. So it's been a good week to be a Scelzi, I guess.
Yeah, that's great to hear. We're definitely going to turn that on right after the episode. To kind of dive in, before we jump into the Peter Murphy Classic, I want to talk about Central California and your kind of decision to, stick around the area for the 2021 season. How has it been just racing around California locally and not out on the road, chasing all these bigger shows?
Man, it's been a lot different. I've spent the last 5 years of, for the most part out on the road. We would be home when the Outlaws came in March. And then we would leave right after the Peter Murphy Classic and basically stay back there until the Outlaws came back to California. And then we would kind of pick and choose, decide whether we'd stay in California or go back out on the road. And, never really ran for points back there, but we always ran, I would say probably 90% of our races were outlaw events. And the rest were filled in with all-star shows. So over the last 5 years, I've really just raced, with the Outlaws or the All-Stars. So to be home racing with the NARC series, it's been a lot different. I ran for the NARC championship in 2019 in the 83 car out here, and I kind of just flew back and forth, but I never really got to, I raced in California. I think I only ran like 25, 30 races, but now I'm actually racing in California full time. So it's been a lot different. A lot of things have actually changed, there's a lot of places I haven't been since 2015 or 16. And, really with the NARC schedule in 2019, there's places I've only been to once in the last 5 or 6 years. So a lot of stuff has really, in my opinion, changed a little bit out here. The competition's incredible. And I've noticed there's a lot of guys from Washington and Oregon and Arizona that come out here on odds and end weekends that they really bring a lot to the racing as well. So it's been a lot of fun this year. We've had a great season to start, and I'm really enjoying myself.
And one thing you kind of touched on there for a second, running a lot of those outlaw shows, and that's, prepared you and obviously made you into the driver that you are today, running against guys like Brad Sweet, Sheldon Haudenschild, David Gravel, like the top guys in the sport. Do you feel like, coming back to California, all that experience you gained, do you feel like the level of intensity and competition's just different out here? Like, obviously it's not at the outlaw level, but there's still so many good cars, and, 360 and even 410 racing starting to come back a little bit in California.
Oh, without a question. I think any driver that wants to do this professionally or just to push themselves to see how good they can become, I don't know if there's any other way than to race with the Outlaws. So many great series out there. You got ASDS, the All-Stars, PA Posse. There's, Ohio guys are really good. Knoxville area is incredible through the Midwest, but there's no group of guys even close to being as good as the Outlaws are. So, there's been a lot of times where I've been on the road and run outside of the top 10 for weeks at a time, or been lucky and put together some good runs, run inside the top 5 or top 10. And to me, I feel like if you can run inside the top 10 with the Outlaws on a regular basis, you could just about win against any group of guys in the country on any given night. And I think that's been proven. There's a lot of guys that if they come out on the road and they go race in the top 10 with the Outlaws for, night in and night out, or the majority of the time, they're successful elsewhere. And that's kind of just been our motto, is we wanted to see how good we could get as a team and how much I could progress as a driver. And I think that's a huge part of it. I've been able to see a lot of amazing racetracks and driven for, quite a few really great people. And I put almost every ounce of success as a driver coming from racing against the Outlaws. And I know you're kind of early in your career, Tanner, but once you get to be able to race with the Outlaws, you can't even understand the level of talent that those guys have. I mean, in Arizona, you saw a little bit of how good some of them Outlaw guys are, but when you have a full group of Outlaw cars, it is incredible how hard those guys can race and how hard they drive every single night. So when you're floundering around in the back, or hey, if you're running up in the front with them, you're pushing yourself to your absolute limits as a driver and as your team. So for me, I think it's huge, and it's in my opinion, just like going to college. You have to put time in to get the product. And I think right now, just being at home full time you're kind of starting to see the years of hard work and the years of getting your butt kicked every night, and how that's showing up now.
I can agree 100%. Going down there, like we ran those 3 races in Arizona, and you go from maybe racing our local guys in the Northwest, or we went to the Midwest a little bit and ran like a speed week. But when you go from that then to racing against Donnie Schatz, all those guys that were down there in Arizona, you and your brother, and so many big names, it's just crazy the next level that you're on. And then even going back to like we ran the Peter Murphy Classic this weekend, and obviously a ton of good cars there, but you think, we ran already against the best, and it just really changes, how it is, now going to all these different racetracks. So I can agree with that. Bennett, you had something?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, so you had mentioned going to all those different racetracks and stuff, and I know me and Tanner can both agree, and we wanted to ask you, what's it like? I mean, California just has those tight bull rings, and it's kind of just a little bit different from the rest of the sprint car racing in the rest of the United States. What are your thoughts on, California and the bull ring type tracks that we have here?
I think what makes it so different from everywhere else in the country is the amount of grip that a lot of the racetracks have. So this weekend, obviously, they didn't. Hanford was super, super slick, which Hanford 9 times out of 10 gets extremely slick. And Tulare was super slick right up against the fence. That is more so like the Midwest. There are bull rings back there. There's a lot of short tracks and stuff back there, but they don't have the grip that the places out here have. And I think that's just probably a lot of racetracks use an excessive amount of water, and they, in my opinion, go a little bit overboard with the track prep. And a lot of times you don't really see it get slick. You almost feel the racetrack just seal over, and then it gets to a huge curve. And although you see that sometimes in the Midwest, you don't see it as often as you do out here. And in my opinion, not that it's a bad thing at all, it's just a different kind of racing. Out here, you have to race super, super hard. You're on the gas a lot. You're really trying to just rip around the cushion. And I think that's something that, growing up out here has really helped me when, you do race faculty outlaws because you have to run the cars so hard out here. But then you go to places like Ohio where, I mean, you could be quarter and half throttle the entire night. Like, I remember times going to Attica and I'll unload and I would literally never get past 3/4 throttle. So that to me, I think, is a huge plus about California racing and West Coast racing in general. I mean, I feel like Oregon has the same type of racing, and Washington, but it's all mostly smaller tracks. They build big curbs. They get, sealed over to where, yes, it's slick, but you can kind of slide across it pretty safely. And then now, you see Hanford and Tulare to where they're actually more so like a Midwest track where it gets super dry, slick. It may build up. It's not a super aggressive curb, and it a lot of times push over the edge or build up against the wall like at Tulare. So those different aspects is why I think you see some guys that are just in California do really well at, Marysville, stuff like that, Petaluma. But then they go to Hanford and Tulare, and they're a little bit different just because those tracks are a little bit more Midwestern, in my opinion, than the others. That, in my opinion, is what helps the guys in California be so well out of California, because they already know how to hustle. It's a little bit easier to slow yourself down and get yourself hooked up than it is to actually really hustle against the cushion.
Gotcha.
And that's one thing we've observed just watching, before I even got into sprint cars, you watch some of the guys that maybe do run like you said, Placerville, Petaluma, Silver Dollar, Marysville on a weekly basis. And then those guys try to go down to, Hanford and Tulare, and the racetracks are just so much different. And even like this weekend for the Peter Murphy Classic, like when we rolled out for a mud pack at Tulare, it looked like there wasn't much water on the racetrack at all. Like some of it was marbles, and I was worried there was even enough moisture to keep the racetrack apart or keep the racetrack together. And so it is kind of cool to see those places transform, because I know that's like more my driving style, is a slick racetrack and, super, super wide. To kind of dive into your Peter Murphy Classic weekend, you guys had a lot of success just to start 2021, a handful of wins. I know Kern County, Tulare, and a couple other tracks, a solid run at Silver Dollar a couple weeks ago. Can you kind of just walk us through your Peter Murphy Classic weekend and what it took, to sweep all 4 A-main events?
Yeah, I think definitely been the best year of my career to start off. We've already won more races than I ever have in a season. So I think my confidence is just really high. And then working with a guy like Jim, he's legitimately won everything there is to win. He's won, an Outlaw Championship. He's won the Knoxville Nationals. He's won at Eldora countless times. Seen it all. He's done it all. He's raced. And, really, he's on the backside of his career. He's close to retirement, and he wanted to retire in California, and we kind of persuaded him to come race with us for, as long as he's willing to race with us out here, because this is kind of the area that he wants to live. And we just really have clicked. Last year we had some success. We won an all-star show. We were in second at I don't know how many races back there. We won a few races, but this year it's been a little bit different in the fact that like all of last really big learning year for him and I to just kind of gel. Now we are gelled together, and he does know what I want, and I know how to talk to him about stuff that I want to feel in the race car, and we've got a great relationship, and we read each other really well. So I guess in a long answer, which I'm pretty long-winded, but you start the season off with wins and running well, and we ran well in Arizona. We won some races out here. We swept Tulare early in the year, which in my opinion, Tulare is a place that I've struggled at because I broke my back there years ago, and I've struggled to get that confidence back in myself there. And so to win the 2 nights there in the 360s earlier in the season was a huge confidence booster. And then we went to Chico and we won the first night, and we went 15th to the lead, and then I lost it on the last lap to Sanders, and that really kind of sparked a fire in me. And then I was able to go to South Dakota and 14th to second. So I feel like we've been really close to a lot of wins, and we have won a lot of races, but I think there's even more that we've left on the table. And, that kind of hunger and that desire to really, do something special was big. It was a big pushing factor for this weekend. And it's so cool to be able to win 2 races in one night. And then, I think everyone was gunning for the Peter Murphy Classic, the 410, the NART, and to have such an incredible race with Bud. I felt like, I left nothing on the table. I gave it absolutely everything I had, and to come away victorious in that, it was like all the pressure was off. And at that point, we'd accomplished the big goal of the year. That was in my opinion, the one race that we had circled on our calendar that we really wanted to run well at. And then, so to go 4 for 4 is something that I never could have dreamed of. I didn't even realize it's possible. And, I've just kind of been on cloud nine since then, and just so thankful that I've got such an amazing opportunity and such amazing people around me that believe in me. And
one of the words you continuously said there was confidence. And I know as a race car driver, like that's something that you have to have. And it's not something you can just say you have. A driver can't just show up to a track and say, I'm confident. You can kind of build that up, through good runs and having speed. How important has it been that you've been confident lately in your equipment, in your ability, and then also in your mechanics working on your race car, which kind of puts the whole package together, to running up front and starting, dominating?
Exactly. And, I remember you went to the ASCS Speed Week through the Midwest there, like I think right after the Knoxville Nationals. I remember seeing your name was popping up in the results. And it's so different going to places that are outside of the West Coast. So you go back there and it's like, okay, I've never been to these places. They race all different. And you can get really low on confidence when you don't have good runs. But then you start putting nights together, and especially when you're away from home and you're like, man, I'm going to these places that I don't really run or, and you start having these good runs, and you do build that confidence that you feel like when I come home, I can take what I've learned and I can really apply it. And I feel like that's kind of just what we're doing. Jimmy has really learned myself as a driver on what I like. And, I've learned, a lot of different ways to drive a race car. And I think that's, like I said, been a big factor in my confidence as a driver. And this as well as anybody. Once you have confidence, like you said, it's hard to beat somebody with confidence. Things cannot be right with a race car. Things can go wrong during the race. And if you have that confidence in your head that, I'm going to overcome it, a lot of times it just works out, plays out that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's crazy. You mentioned, a driver with confidence, it's hard to beat. And that's why I think, some of these outlaw guys are, Kyle Larson, a perfect example. Once they get going, there's really no stopping them.
I agree 100%. And that's something that's taken me a long time. I've raced sprint cars for 10 years, and I've had a lot of ups and downs and moments where it's like, okay, I finally got it. I know what I'm doing. Well, then 2 months later, I realized I have no idea what I'm doing. So it's a long process, and these cars are so difficult to drive. I always laugh that, you hear some guys be like, oh yeah, this guy's a slap, or, oh, they're only racing against whoever. Well, I've never in my life seen a sprint car race that was an easy race to win. There's always somebody there. There's always good cars at every event. Everyone's racing as hard as they can. Maybe some races are harder than others, but, driving a sprint car, if you can win a sprint car race, you've really accomplished something, in my opinion. So I think the more that you race sprint cars, the more that you race 410s, you're going to notice that it becomes easier in the 360s. So in my opinion, I think it's just a learning process, and it just takes time for everybody. And it's taken me, in my opinion, 10 years to get to the point that I feel like I can win anywhere at any time. And it's a special feeling. It's something that I'm not taking for granted at all. It's something I'm going to enjoy, hopefully, for the next 10 years.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there, and that's something, those exact words is what I was saying. Actually, at Tulare, it's just these cars are so hard to drive. You go out there, you watch people, you watch the highlights, and it looks way easier than it is. Then you actually get out on the racetrack, maybe it's slick or it's rough, and just sitting behind the wheel of one of these things, it's hard to compare it to anything else. One of our last questions relating to the Peter Murphy Classic and your successful weekend, you've won a lot of races. You mentioned an all-star show. You've ran up front at some of the biggest races in the country. Where does the Peter Murphy Classic and, your sweep kind of rank amongst all those other achievements?
This is definitely the biggest one for me. It may not be the most prestigious or anything like that yet. I mean, it's really been built into something that, in my opinion, is absolutely a must-win race for guys that are racing in the West Coast. If you're a hitter, you want to win the Peter Murphy Classic. And if you're out of California, you want to win the Peter Murphy. So for me, it's definitely my number one. I was able to win some really cool races over the last few years. And, I would take the World Challenge was huge. The winning with the All-Stars was huge. I've really been able to accomplish some cool stuff. The Dirt Classic at Calistoga. But this one for me, this weekend, ranks as number one. I mean, I never in a million years would have dreamed I could win 4 races in 2 nights. The Peter Murphy Classic, in my opinion, it's the 410 event in California. It's the 7th annual this year, so I think that it's going to be something that's going to be around for a very long time. It's something that, in 30 or 40 years, we're going to talk about the 50th annual or the 47th annual, and it's going to just have a lot of history behind it. And I truly believe every great race starts with a great person, and Peter Murphy is a great man to be behind that event, and he's done a wonderful job for racing in general. Not only being the promoter of King Speedway in Hanford, but with the Peter Murphy Classic. And, it's a race that I want to add my name to several more times throughout my career, but I think it's going to be something that, I've got a kid on the way here that's going to be doing about 7 or 8 weeks, and it's going to be something that I hope when they race, or if they race, they're going to want to win the Peter Murphy Classic as well. Something that I really hope is around for a long time.
And that's kind of a topic I wanted to transition to, just talking about Peter Murphy for a minute. You said he's such a great ambassador for the sport. He puts on a huge event. But what are some of the things, because you're right down there, in the Central Valley, where his racetrack's at, some of the things he's trying to do and ideas to bring back 410s and keep 360 racing so healthy. And, for example, you sticking around in California for 2021, not doing a lot of traveling. There's so many teams in the state like that. What are some of the things, he's kind of doing that is going to help to where you guys are going to be able to run more shows than you ever have before?
One thing that I think is extremely important in California and the West Coast in general is, if we look back 10 to 12 years, there was a lot of healthy 410 events. We had the NARC series that would run 25, 30 events. Chico was running Friday night 410 shows. Skagit ran weekly 410 shows and 360s. And now we look at it, and I'm not really sure where we've gotten lost, but we've lost a lot of the 410 footprint. And I'm going to say a 410 guy, because that's where my heart really is running the 410 stuff. And I feel that that's where sprint car racing needs to get back to. I think it's so important that Peter is doing these local 410 shows like he did on Friday night, and to try and take the emphasis off of having a big hitting motor or having these big teams win everything. He's taking qualifying away, and he's running a 2 heat race format to allow guys to have the opportunity to succeed against maybe a better funded team. And I think that's something that is very important. Maybe we need to change the formats around. Maybe we need to run special events, or maybe inverted events. I know a lot of races in Pennsylvania, they invert 12 cars for the main event. I think stuff like that is something we need to start looking at for local 410 events, try and grow the 410 population in California. And then I think we need to put a full-on assault, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years. If we can grow the 410s back up in California, we need to put a full-on assault in Washington. And, the Dirt Cup used to be a 410 event. That's now no longer a 410 event. Try and focus very hard light out here, because, in my opinion, nothing creates better racing. And Peter Murphy has done a phenomenal job already at trying to bring back that 410 life. And I know that there's a lot of 360 teams out here that run Hanford that have, now started purchasing 410s just for this event. So I think that's going to be something great that we're going to probably talk about in a few years. Hopefully you're going to be able to come down here a little bit more. I know we've actually never met, but I hear about you all the time with all the kids that their parents work at Scelzi Enterprises. They always watch your videos. So hopefully you're going to be coming down here a little bit more, and we're going to be able to actually meet in person, and you'll be able to race a little bit more 410 stuff down here.
Yeah, well, that is the game plan. We want to get down there and run a little bit more, because there is not much 410 racing on the West Coast, so we got to take advantage to what's close.
So
Right.
I have a question. So since you are home, what does your weekly schedule look like now? Do you have more time in the shop, and do you think that helps you mentally prepare for the upcoming race weekend?
So I actually don't spend a whole lot of time in our race shop. I go to work around 5:30 or so. We start work at 6, and then I'm off around either 2:40 on a regular day or 4:20 on an overtime day. And I really never know what I'm going to get when I go to work. So Jimmy's there every day, all the time. And, at lunchtime, I always go over there, and him and I go to lunch a lot. But I think what has helped me out a lot mentally is I'm not doing it for a living anymore. And when I was doing it for a living, I felt like it was to the point where it was taking over my life. And I was really having a hard time balancing my life and my racing. And, I was racing 90 times a year, and I was wanting to race 120. And, we were working really hard, but we were really only running outlaw races. And I wasn't capable of competing, in the top 5 as much as I needed to feel like I was really accomplishing what I wanted to. So then last year we kind of ran a little bit more all-star stuff. And I mean, we very much exceeded our expectations. We ran second a bunch of times. We made 12 dashes or whatever it was, and ran really well. So then that kind of got me back to the point, why don't we just go have fun with this? We'll race the outlaw races that we feel we go to tracks that we're good at. run all-star stuff where we feel like we need to gain it. And I think that really helped me a lot to get me mentally right. But something that I think, has been the biggest thing is now that this is for fun. This isn't something that I have to win or I have to run the top 3 to be able to pay my bills. This is something that I can roll in and, hey, I'm going to have fun. I just want to win. So instead of going back to work on Monday as, running 12th, I want to go back there with a winner. And if I don't win, I can still pay for my food and my dogs are still going to eat and the lights are still going to be on in my house. So I think that's been a big change in attitude. And I think that's been another part of probably helping me run a little bit better this year, that, I'm not as worried about what the paycheck's going to be after the weekend. It's going to be more so, hey, I just, whatever I win, it's going to be a little bit of a bonus or fun money. And, I've got my paycheck every week from work. So that helps me a lot.
And coming up in California, as the year progresses, I know Tanner would like to get down there, like you had mentioned. What are some of the more upcoming races that you guys have your eye on to go and hit in the upcoming year?
Well, we're obviously NARC races. So that's, I believe it's 21 or 22 races all year long. We're going to run all the Hanford 410 shows, all the Hanford 360 shows. So we're pretty much going to cover all of the central NARC schedule for the year. But, there's a lot of really big races. You got the Louis Vermeil. The Howard Kading is a very big one. You've got the Champions Classic. You got the California Speed Week with the NARC Series. You got a lot of amazing races out here that have a lot of special, mottos to them. The Trophy Cup, obviously, the Gold Cup. So really, if the race has a name, we want to win it more so. And if it has a big check, we want to win that as well. So for me, I'm just going to try and hit all the big ones in California, all the NARC races. And, there's some exciting stuff coming up here in the upcoming weeks with being at Watsonville for the Pombo Sargent. And, there's a lot of big races out here, a lot of historic races that have been around for a long time. So whenever you can put your name on a race that's been around for 10, 20, 30 years, it's extremely special.
Cool.
That's great, and it'll be awesome to follow along with your schedule. Our final question, before you hang it up, looking way down the road, as you continue your racing career, I know in other interviews you've said, you're not permanently staying in California. If possible, you'd like to get back out on the road. What does that goal look like? Do you just want to eventually be a full-time outlaw at some point, or at least just do it to say you've done it? Or is there specific races or whatnot you want to chase, maybe on that outlaw schedule?
To be completely honest, there was a long time in my life that I dreamed and really wanted to work very hard to get to the Outlaw Tour. And as the older I've gotten, the more that dream is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of shrunk, kind of changed. I think for me, I have more fun just racing and doing it because I love it and not really because there's something I'm really chasing. But in reality, there's only about 4 things that I am dead set that I absolutely have to accomplish before I hang the helmet up. And, it's winning the Trophy Cup, winning a race at Houston, because that's such a historic event. I want to win the Gold Cup Race of Champions, which is obviously an outlaw event. And I want to win an outlaw race. So those 4 to me are very near and dear to my heart. And very special to me. So if I can knock off those 4, if I can win those 4, I've done everything I ever dreamed of and more.
That's cool.
That's great to hear. Well, Dominic, thank you so much for joining us today on Off the Track. Congratulations on your successful weekend, and I'm sure we will see you down in California soon.
Awesome, guys. Thanks very much. And I look forward to racing with you soon.
So what a phenomenal interview there with Dominic Scelzi. What a well-spoken guy. We haven't got the chance to meet him in person, but I follow him on Twitter, and he always has the funniest post. Right after his victories at Keller Auto Speedway in Tulare, he was posting a lot about what they were eating for dinner, and he had selfies, and he had like his lasagna and all that good stuff. And it was great to hear also the other topics, ranging from sprint car racing in California, how it's different than the Midwest, and also, what his goals are kind of going forward after 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also like kind of cool to step back and look at this perspective when he mentioned the top 4 things on his list to do. And I think one was the Peter Murphy Classic, or it's the Peter Murphy plus the other 4. Which some of those things included a win at Huset's, an all-star win, which he had already accomplished, winning at Knoxville, and an outlaw win, and with that included the Gold Cup of Race of Champions, which is local to me and local to you, I guess
Northern
you could
California.
say, Northern California. But it's kind of cool to step back and look at, each individual driver has a goal and a mindset in what they want to accomplish in their career that's completely different. Like, to me, my goal is to go to NASCAR and win, a championship or the Daytona 500, something like that, or win at Sonoma. And for you, I could imagine it's completely different as well.
Just go as far as you can go is what I like to say. In dirt racing and stuff nowadays, it's really it's tough because I think actually just in racing in general, so many doors can open and so many doors can close. But yeah, like my childhood dream was always like same NASCAR. Be in victory lane one time, like make it happen. And yeah, it was interesting to hear his goals and, also how he is so far into his racing career, but still has so much left.
Right.
He talked about how he's just kind of feels like he's starting to get to his peak and get, towards the top of his game. And it all goes to all those years of dedicated work, in the shop, at the track, putting in those hours and, racing against the best of the best. And, you may be in the back running with some of the best of the best, the Outlaws, or you have your good nights or you qualify good here or have a good heat race there. But, it's really starting to show now that he's back in California full time, really how good he is.
Yeah, I liked how he also mentioned, even if you go run with the Outlaws or something like that, even when you're running in the back, you're running as hard as possible. So that's why he's learned running these California tracks. You just have to run them as hard as possible because even running in the back there, it truly is the best of the best sprint car competition when you're running with the Outlaws, the All-Stars.
Yeah.
So that was a cool mention that he had brought up.
Yeah, it was great to talk to Dominic Scelzi for episode 18, and we're going to get more sprint car guys, crew chiefs, car owners, people that have many different angles of the sport and, hopefully from more events like this one because it couldn't have worked out any better.
Right.
We're at the Peter Murphy Classic, and we have the guy that dominated the event. So now kind of moving into my Peter Murphy Classic to talk about some of the behind-the-scenes things here for the podcast. It was a good weekend, 2-night show. The second night paid $11,000, which was a KWS race. That was my first time running with that series. It was kind of neat after all these years of kind of watching highlights of it, throughout California to make my first start, which was my sixth career 410 start after running, down in Arizona and then some King of Thunder races there at Hanford twice. But other than that, it was a great weekend. We started out at the Colorado Speedway and we had some good speed. One of the things Dominic actually mentioned in his interview was how they've been playing with some different formats. And that first night was that two heat race format, no qualifying, which gives, other teams maybe that can't qualify as well or have the biggest engine a chance to go out there and race.
Yeah, and one thing that you mentioned to me and when you called me, I think it was on Sunday recapping the weekend, is how the two heat races inverted.
Yeah.
But it was different cars. And I know we had talked about it a little bit off camera, and I think we could bring it up here now on camera. See, when you mention that to me I feel like it would be a little confusing. And when you normally race like an outlaw kart format at the Nationals or something, you're with the same guys just inverted. So you know what guy is going to do what. Like, for example, Rico Abreu loves to run the top. So you could tell if you're going to start by this person, this is what they're going to do. So you could, almost judge your start. And I think that almost, I don't know if you would say bit you or whatnot, but in your second heat race, you started front row outside, right? And then if you want to tell the viewers exactly what happened there.
Yeah, it kind of did. So I was, started last in the second heat race, but I was the second 410 heat race to go out in the first set.
Okay, gotcha.
And I started 8th. And then that second time, like you said, it did bit me, but I was expecting to start on the pole, but then when they posted the lineups, I started front row outside with different cars that I ran with in that first heat.
Yeah.
And I didn't get a good start. I kind of misjudged it. And sure enough, we were getting death sliders into one, which if anybody doesn't know what a death slider or death bomb, we like to call them, it's pretty much where, don't get me wrong, they were clean sliders, but it's just where, maybe the racetrack's not the raciest and, guys are all fighting for one lane. So you send it in there as hard as you can and you start making each other lift, which that's all part of wing sprint car racing, but that's just kind of where the track was that first night. And one of the reasons I think why it wasn't that good is we kind of noticed when we were packing in the racetrack, there was part of the racetrack that didn't really get any moisture and wasn't, broken apart, that it was already packed in like they had been rolling around with the water truck. And that just kind of killed the bottom all night long down there. And when we were there in April, the bottom was good. And that's kind of where I felt like we shined a little bit. So with more of a one lane track, around a curb, I struggle more at that style of racing, but we got some valuable laps. The racetrack took rubber, towards the middle stages of the race. But one more thing to talk about that first night is it was super dusty. There's dust all over the racetrack. And on the initial start, it was so dusty, I actually could say I could not see any of the cars around me.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually scary it's like having a blindfold on and you're still on the gas and you're still trying to be aggressive because you don't want to lose spots. Granted, I was already close to the back, but at one point you pause the GoPro even and you can literally not see any of the cars that were, just right there in front of me.
I bet you that lasted for at least a solid minute in your mind too.
It felt like it, and that's what's nuts. And looking on the GoPro, it doesn't look as bad as it felt, but it definitely was bad. The video doesn't even do it justice. So that was night number 1 right there at the Colorado Speedway. So many fans, came over to our pit after, and that's one of the fun parts about Central California. They have a pretty strong fan base for non-wing, wing, midgets, whatever it is. If there's a dirt track race, a lot of people are going to show up. And I was going to say, I think you actually said the show ran a little bit later than you would normally prefer it would. And so I think you said maybe around 10:30, 11 o'clock it ended up, but you still had a good amount of fans at the trailer. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we had a huge turnout, and a lot of this time it was like families, maybe 6 or groups of 6 or 7 people at a time. And we love to hear everyone's story. So we got the chance to chit chat with people, catch up with some of our friends that we saw the first time we were there, which is neat because you kind of, you see their face, reminds you of, that first interaction we had. But moving into the second night at Tulare, something that we kind of talked about before the weekend was Tulare is kind of just an intimidating place. We went there in March, and that was my first ever trip. But there's something about the racetrack, the facility, all the highlight footage, and a lot of them have a lot of carnage in it, wrecks and the Trophy Cup and events like that. And the Peter Murphy Classic is usually just an event at Tulare, but this year is split between the 2 tracks. But it's kind of intimidating.
Well, it's funny, too, is when we talked to Dominic about it as well, if you watch Dominic Racer now, you'd think he's putting on a clinic. It's a walk in the park. But even he says, he broke his back there a while ago in a wreck, and he's still intimidated by it today, and it's just one of those places that's real technical to get around.
Yeah, when he won there in March, he mentioned in the interview, like you were saying, you wouldn't think that he was, or he doesn't usually feel that good there at Tulare, but something's really clicking this year for their team, and I think it's just a big thing about confidence.
Yep.
And Tulare's a place you got to have confidence. And I think as a newer driver and not having a lot of laps around there, for me, it's more nerves. It's not that I'm worried that like I can't do something. It's just, you just don't know because you hear all these stories about Tulare, the infamous turn 1 hole, and you watch all the highlights of the guys going in there and, things just don't go right. So Tulare is just kind of an intimidating place. So we didn't qualify good. And another thing to mention right before qualifying, we didn't pull a good pill, just like the night before. Our pill draws were not good this weekend.
I think you're kind of famous for it.
Yeah, it's kind of turning into part of our brand, and the dirt track world keeps giving me more of that. But the racetrack was similar to Hanford in the sense that it was really crumbly. I don't know what it was, but we rolled out there, and I mentioned that actually, now that I think about it, in the Dominic interview for a second. He also talked about the track conditions and how, Tulare and Hanford have not been getting as much water as maybe they used to. They're starting to be really, really slick, which we like slick tracks, but the track is almost not getting enough water to where it stays together. It starts to peel apart, and that's where it doesn't necessarily get rough, but it's unique.
It's a different surface.
Yeah, it's not like smooth, but it's not rough, but it doesn't like pack. I don't know. I'm not a big track prep guy. I couldn't prep a track, but that's just kind of what I'm observing when I'm rolling around out there. Yeah. But anyway, we didn't run the right line in qualifying. I just didn't lay down a good lap. But we went forward in our heat race, started 8th, ran 4th, and it was super slick, dusty. But you could see another thing about that place and a lot of tracks, I'm sure, that we go to throughout the year, depending on how the sun's setting, it makes it really difficult to see, usually down the backstretch. Hanford and Tulare are the exact same. Entering 3, you can see, and then you hit the shade, and for a second, you can't find where the curb's at.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's kind of different, between every racetrack and how that shade kind of messes with you. I know my first time at Hanford, it really got to me, and you just kind of have to, just try to hit the same mark every single lap and, close your eyes for a second and get through it. But we did good in our heat race. We started 16th in the A, and one of the main things we wanted to work on was just driving the race car really, really hard.
And I think you accomplished that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we knocked the Jacobs ladder out. I hit the wall a couple of times, but that was all just because I was trying to stand on the gas and go for it.
Yeah.
Our result doesn't really show that we were as fast as we were, but we were throwing sliders and we were racing anywhere between 11th and 16th. They did have double file restarts, which, kind of was a little bit of a curveball because we rarely do double file restarts in sprint cars. So every restart, back to the death bombs. Just slide someone, or slide or be slid.
And I think your reference to that is it reminds you of Red Bluff almost, like carts.
Absolutely. It literally is Red Bluff, but almost, crazier because it's almost like if Cycleland did double file restarts, because it's a bigger track, so you do have a lot of room. It doesn't feel like you're super tight door to door, but it's just you go into the corner, it's like, all right, who's sliding me next? Is this guy 2 rows back and he's trying to clear, a 3-car bomb or something? So that's just how Tulare was. And I wasn't able to watch as far as in front of me maybe as I wanted to, but, I'm assuming the racing was just as intense, maybe between 5th and 10th. And up front, they were Dominic and Kading and all those guys were throwing a lot of sliders. So the racetrack did kind of get abrasive at the end. And like I said, we ran 16th. So our results for the weekend are nothing to brag about, but we learned so much. And I think, that's kind of where I'm at, is like looking at, results and lap times and watch the footage back and say, hey, what are all these things that we did right? And how can we build off that and use that? And also it's a 410. We haven't ran a lot of 410 races. Besides Arizona and a little bit earlier this season, down in the Central Valley again. But, just trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together and, kind of continue to build that as we go throughout our year.
Yeah, like Dominic said, too, the more you run the 410, and then you get back in the 360, it starts to slow it down. And I think a good way to look at this weekend, and any weekend that's kind of like that, is you're pretty much just gathering tools and not necessarily physically, but you're using tools that you learn from each race that you could take with you, when we travel or when we go somewhere new, or, when we go run Skagit sometimes. So I think it was a great weekend to collect more tools to use with you when you go to other places.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy. And the 410 to the 360 thing, just like a 500 outlaw cart to a 250, or, maybe a class in micros where you're dropping down, even though the competition's, just as stout. In California, there's more 360s than there is 410, so almost the competition's tougher.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, running the 410 a lot and how aggressive those guys were. And even though we're running around in the back and we're all putting our best foot forward, now going into the 360, I think that's kind of where the improvement is seen more, not necessarily in the coming 410 races. I mean, eventually you do see the improvement,
right.
But if you want to look for quicker results, you're going to maybe see that in those 360 races. So a couple more things just to touch on key takeaways from the weekend. An insane crowd turnout between the 2 nights, packed. I don't know if it was sold out, but I mean, they had as many people in there, I think, as they possibly could. Tulare, one thing to mention about Tulare that I tried for the first time, if you guys are ever there, they have a really good tri-tip sandwich.
Yeah.
I don't know if you tried that when you were there with us in March.
No, I had the linguiça, I think.
Oh, so. Gotcha. Yeah, no, so that tri-tip sandwich is really good. I'm big into that. So if you're at Trophy Cup, try that out. The racetrack conditions, they were all right. It was racy at some points. It could have been better, but I've never prepped a racetrack before, so I can't talk too much. But just, like I said, from being behind the wheel, it was racy, but it wasn't. But I think they put their best foot forward. Another thing to mention, it was $500, or they gave Tanner Holmes Racing $500 for the second longest tow. I think Robbie Price also got that because sponsors put up a bunch of prize money, and one of them was the longest tow. So that was super generous, and they also had great payouts. The Peter Murphy Classic takes care of everyone, whether you're winning the race or you're starting and parking.
Right.
And it was awesome just to see a bunch more Cali friends. Every time we get down there, we're not racing in the Central Valley a lot, and we're not down in California a lot. Besides, we're down there more for our outlaw carts, it feels like, in the wintertime than sprint cars. So anytime we get to see California friends, that's a plus. And then also we got home at 10 a.m. Sunday morning. Dad trucked through the night. So, we got home safely, got everything washed up, and now we're already looking forward at, what these next couple of weeks look like. Let's wrap up today's video, or today's podcast, I should say, with a fan question, and it comes from Anthony. How is the California competition different than other regions you've raced? And Dominic talked a little bit about this, but just from like a spectator's view, mainly in the wing sprint cars, what are some things you've kind of noticed in the couple trips we've went down there?
I just know, so I think you could totally agree, is like you said before, is you really like a slick track, and California is more known for a heavier track for sure. And then also just the bull rings in California. And it's not that you can't adapt to running a bull ring, but you know, when you go back and run in the Midwest, which I haven't had the opportunity to travel too far in the Midwest with you, so I'm excited to do that in the upcoming months. But it's awesome to watch your videos and watch how you keep the car straight as possible.
Yeah.
And now you're running these little bull rings like Ocean Speedway where you're flicking it in. And it's kind of funny, too, is some of these tracks, like when we went down there, some of our friends, I think, told you this is where the line is for qualifying, because it's infamous for being the same thing every weekend.
Yeah.
And then the time you show up, obviously, you run the line you're told, and it was not the line. So I think that's just a good way to put California has just got these tight bull rings that tend to hook up. And just like Dominic Scelzi had said, they just build a really big curb.
Yeah, and that curb is tricky to run. And a lot of it deals with wheel spin and, being able to drive the car sideways, which is something I haven't really figured out yet. And it's weird because if you run a lot of tracks like Cottage Grove, you're really keeping the car straight there, because that place may be a bull ring technically. It's a quarter mile, but it races like the biggest track you've ever ran. Yeah. And you can just drive the race car really hard. So you're definitely not trying to be sideways there. You mentioned Ocean Speedway, some other tracks to list. I haven't been there, but you can just watch footage and see Ocean,
Placerville
for sure. Petaluma maybe a little bit. That's a little bit of a larger track, but Marysville, Silver Dollar even maybe a little bit. Yeah. But you can kind of group up some of these tracks where these certain guys are really fast, and then maybe like the Colorado Speedway or Tulare, which is a little bit of an oddball compared to those other places. They're starting to get slicker. The track prep's a little bit different. And some of those guys that are really good at the bull rings are starting to struggle at these, not really big tracks, but, just bigger and different surface. So, how is the competition different? Also, I think there's just a lot of really good guys down there, and they're not afraid to stand on the gas.
And it's not only that, too, is I think a good analogy applies. So when you run at Red Bluff every weekend, we know the track, and to a lot of people that come for the first time, they're very intimidated, one, by the competition, and not only that is the track also it's a tight bull ring. So a lot of people think you want to flick it in a car. Obviously you don't. You want to keep it straight as possible. But I think that really applies in the sprint car world as well, because when you have people that run Ocean on the Friday night schedule, or Placerville or Marysville, and they run them regularly, they're going to be a lot better there, because that's just their home track.
And that's just their normal.
Right, and so that's the same thing applies to, probably running Cottage Grove, or when you did run White City in the Limited. Yeah. It just applies that way.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. That's a perfect way to put it. It's just whatever your normal is, and California's normal. From observations and from being down there, there's a lot of really good teams. There's a lot of big names that have a lot of history in the area. And people that don't get me wrong, they venture out and maybe they go to the Midwest or come to the Northwest and race. But a lot of guys just kind of stick around in Cali. They have a decent variety of tracks from a couple bigger places, a lot of bull rings if that's what you're into. And that's just kind of what becomes their normal.
And not to cut you off, but a good example is Justin Sanders this year. You could easily say, look at him at Ocean Speedway and Placerville. It's just what he's been dominant at.
He's insane.
So when you show up there, you expect this is the guy to beat. Almost when people come to Red Bluff, they're like, oh, Tanner Holmes, Landon Brooks, Carson Perkins. Those are the guys to beat in outlaw carts.
Yeah, it's fun to watch California. It can be tough to race down there because there's just so much good competition and guys that are up on the wheel. But that is going to kind of wrap up episode number 18. This weekend, I think we're either going to be at the Cottage Grove Speedway or Skagit. Yep. I know our schedule says Elma, so I'm going to have to change that, but I didn't want to change anything until I knew. Yeah. Do you have any plans for this weekend?
I think we got our harness back today, so my dad's putting it on right now, so we should be running Wairika Saturday with a Southern Oregon Dwarf Car Association race. So
that'll be fun.
We'll see, yeah.
But that's going to wrap up today's episode. You guys can listen to the audio version on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and if you have not yet, make sure you subscribe to the Off the Track podcast channel right here on YouTube for the video version every single week, and comment below who you want to see next. Yep. We're going to try to get as many guests as possible. We're still going to have episodes just by ourselves to recap and talk about all the exciting things that don't make it in our 15-minute vlogs.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a lot of fun, and we'll see you all in episode 19.
See you guys there.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.